A very good morning to one and all. Framed in 1986 and modified in 1992, National Education Policy treaded a long journey. NEP 2020 hopes to bring in significant change in education sector. IQAC of St. Xavier's College is always alert to respond to new and challenging issues. This webinar will definitely throw light on the veiled aspects of NEP. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, and skillful execution. That is our IQAC coordinator. I invite Dr. Sheena Xavier to welcome the gathering.
Thank you, Sonia. Good morning to all. Respected Principal, Dr. Sister Gigi Joanama Xavier, esteemed resource person, Professor Rajan Verghese, Vice Principal, Dr. Sister Stella, and dear participants. Over the last few days, we have seen the approval of long-awaited and an overdue national policy on education. The new education policy proposes to unify the early childhood school education system and the higher education process in India. What that is to be expected will be a balanced, time-bound and blended implementation of the policy. Many national councils and committees are being restructured for the effective implementation of this policy. This complex task, spanning another decade, should be analyzed properly by the entire academic community. I take this opportunity to congratulate the conveners, Dr. Aparna and Ms. Sonia, for finding the right resource person for this webinar and also for organizing it in a very short notice. The vision and leadership of our dear principal, Reverend Sister Gigi Joanama Xavier, lead the internal quality assurance cell to take up quality initiatives for the overall development of the institution. It is her motivation that encourages us to conduct webinars and such other empowering activities. I extend most hearty welcome to you, sister.
Thank you, Dr. Sheena.
Today we have with us Dr. Rajan Verghese, the Member Secretary to the Kerala State Higher Education Council and the former Pro-Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University, to give us an insight into the topic National Education Policy 2020 and Higher Education in Kerala. Professor Rajan Verghese, as we all know, proved himself as one of the best administrators of the Mahatma Gandhi University, in whose term many of the academic activities of the university started functioning in a regular manner. On behalf of St. Xavier's College, I welcome you, sir, to this online gathering. I extend a sincere welcome to our dynamic Vice Principal, Dr. Sister Stella. Hearty welcome to you, sister.
Thank you, Dr. Sheena.
Hearty welcome to all the participants. It is your cooperation and involvement makes this webinar a successful one. Thank you all. Over to you, Sonia.
Thank you, ma'am. Reverend Dr. Sister Gigi Joanama Xavier, our beloved principal, is magnanimous enough in extending her support and guidance in all IQAC activities. Sister always encourages us to take new initiatives. I welcome our beloved principal for the presidential address.
ഏവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ആദരണീയനായ ഇന്നത്തെ വിശിഷ്ട അതിഥി കേരള സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ കൗൺസിൽ മെമ്പർ സെക്രട്ടറി ഡോക്ടർ രാജൻ വർഗീസ്, IQAC coordinator Dr. Sheena Xavier, and dear participants. India, a global knowledge superpower എന്ന ലക്ഷ്യത്തോടെ ന്യൂ നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷണൽ പോളിസി 2020ക്ക് അംഗീകാരമുദ്ര വീണു കഴിഞ്ഞു. അംഗനവാടി തലം മുതൽ കോളേജ് തലം വരെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ രംഗത്ത് സമഗ്രമായ ഒരു പുനർവിന്യാസം നടത്തുവാനുള്ള തീവ്ര യത്നത്തിന്റെ ഭാഗമാണ് NEP. സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യലബ്ധിക്ക് ശേഷം 1968-ലും 86-ലുമാണ് എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി പരിഷ്കരിക്കപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ളത്. മാനവ വിഭവശേഷി മന്ത്രാലയം ഇനി മുതൽ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ മന്ത്രാലയമായി അറിയപ്പെടുമെന്നും ക്യാബിനറ്റ് ഇത്തരുണത്തിൽ പ്രഖ്യാപിക്കുകയുണ്ടായി. ഒരു രാജ്യത്തിന്റെ സാംസ്കാരിക വളർച്ച ആ നാടിന്റെ വൈജ്ഞാനിക മേഖലയെ ആശ്രയിച്ചാണ് നിലകൊള്ളുക. വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തിന് അത്രമാത്രം പ്രാധാന്യമുണ്ട്. പുതിയതായി അംഗീകരിച്ച നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി വിശദമായ വിശകലനത്തിലൂടെയും ചർച്ചയിലൂടെയും ആഴമായ പഠനത്തിലൂടെയും രൂപപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. എന്നാൽ സ്ഥലകാല സന്ദർഭങ്ങൾക്കനുസരിച്ചും ഓരോ സംസ്ഥാനത്തിന്റെയും പരിതോവസ്ഥകൾക്കനുസൃതമായും ഇതിനെ ചിട്ടപ്പെടുത്തേണ്ടത് അനിവാര്യമാണ്. അതിന്റെ ഭാഗമായി കേരളത്തിലെ അക്കാദമിക സമൂഹം ഇന്ന് ആഴത്തിലുള്ള സംവാദങ്ങൾക്ക് വേദി ഒരുക്കിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ആലുവ സെന്റ് സേവിയേഴ്സ് കോളേജിലെ IQAC വിഭാഗവും ഇത്തരുണത്തിൽ കാലോചിതമായ സന്ദർഭങ്ങൾക്ക് മുൻതൂക്കം നൽകി ഇന്നിവിടെ ഒരു ഓൺലൈൻ സംവാദം സംഘടിപ്പിച്ചിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ സന്ദർഭത്തിൽ കോളേജിലെ IQAC ടീമിനെ ഞാൻ ഹൃദയപൂർവ്വം അഭിനന്ദിക്കുകയും നല്ലൊരു വെബിനാർ ആശംസിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു. ഇന്നത്തെ ഈ ചർച്ചയ്ക്ക് നേതൃത്വം നൽകുവാൻ ഏറ്റവും അനുയോജ്യനായ ഒരു റിസോഴ്സ് പേഴ്സൺ ആണ് ഡോക്ടർ രാജൻ വർഗീസ്. നമ്മുടെ കലാലയത്തിൽ സർ പല പ്രാവശ്യവും വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. സഹോദര തുല്യമായ സ്നേഹവും വാത്സല്യവുമാണ് സെന്റ് സേവിയേഴ്സിനോട് സർ എന്നും പുലർത്തിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. സെന്റ് സേവിയേഴ്സ് കോളേജ് മാനേജ്മെന്റിന്റെ പേരിലും ഫാക്കൽറ്റി മെമ്പേഴ്സിന്റെ പേരിലും ഇന്നത്തെ വെബിനാറിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന എല്ലാ പാർട്ടിസിപ്പൻസിന്റെ പേരിലും രാജൻ വർഗീസ് സാറിനെ സ്നേഹപൂർവ്വം ഞാൻ സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുകയും ഈ വെബിനാറിന് എല്ലാ ആശംസകൾ നേരുകയും ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് നിർത്തുന്നു. നന്ദി.
Thank you, sister. In the wake of new educational policy norms, we are fortunate enough to have with us an eminent academician and administrator, Dr. Rajan Varghese, Member Secretary, the Kerala State Higher Education Council, and former Pro Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. On behalf of the management, IQAC, and the entire Severian family, welcome you, sir, to this webinar. Over to you, sir.
Good morning to all. Principal at the college, Dr. Sister Gigi Joanama Xavier. Vice Principal, Reverend Sister Stella. Dr. Sheena Xavier, IQAC Coordinator. Dr. Abarna Lakshman, Coordinator of this webinar. Ms. Sonia Marcos, members of the faculty, and my dear teachers and other resource persons attending this webinar. So I'm very privileged to once again associate with the academic activities of St. Xavier's College, Alva, which has emerged as a major seat of learning in this part of the state. They are in the forefront of academic and other activities. And it is in this context that they have taken up a discussion on the national education policy. Actually, the policy document is a very big document. The draft contained nearly 470 pages. But when the final policy document was accepted by the Central Cabinet on 29 July, it has been reduced to 62 pages, which contains recommendations right from, as the principal noted, from Anganwadi to higher education. And as noted earlier, the country had several important milestones in the development of higher education, especially backed by eminent leaders and also important documents or higher education policies. For example, in 1964-66, we had the Kothari Commission report, which actually guided education till 2000 in this country. And the 1986 policy reflected some of the aspirations of the country and the recommendations in the Kothari Commission report. But after 2000, we find drastic changes in the approach of the central government with regard to education at all levels, especially higher education. In 2000, we had the Ambani-Birla report on education. Similarly, between 2006 and 2009, there was the report of the National Knowledge Commission. Actually, Knowledge Commission published 4 reports, which include important recommendations on higher education also. And in fact, after a gap of nearly 34 years, we have a well-drafted policy document on education. And it was approved by the central government, and several pieces of legislation has to follow for implementing this policy document. Actually, a bill has been introduced in the published by the government for abolishing or renaming UGC and AICT as the National Education Commission. That bill is already published by the central government. So in the coming days, along with this policy pronouncement, we are going to witness a plethora of legislative initiatives to implement these policies. So it is very important at this point to discuss and debate the policy which will have its impact on, at least on the legislative process that are coming up in the next 1 or 2 months' time. And we confine our discussion to higher education in the state of Kerala, but higher education in the state of Kerala cannot be discussed in isolation. It is part and parcel of the global system and the context. In India, we know we have nearly 1,000 university level institutions and we have 40,000 colleges. But coming to Kerala, we have only a very small share of these institutions. We have only 14 public universities. Private universities are trying to establish their campuses in Kerala. And we have 1,400 higher education institutions comprising mainly of colleges. And the number of aided colleges, especially in the arts and in sector of both, including government colleges, it's only less than 300. So this is the general institutional situation that is prevailing in the state. And coming to the participation of youth in higher education, there are several important indices. For example, at the global level, there is a practice to link higher education development and economic development. People argue that the level of economic development is closely linked to the enrollment in higher education. Higher the enrollment in higher education, greater will be the level of economic development. That is one argument. This is also evident in the case of several developed countries. For example, the group of developed countries are called the OECD countries. It's the club of the rich countries, where the average enrollment in higher education is nearly 60%, which means that youth in the relevant age group, 18 to 23, in those countries, they are getting the benefits of higher education. And in a country like India, the enrollment in higher education, based on government statistics, every year MHRD is publishing data on higher education, and it's called the All India Higher Education Survey. Our colleges are participating in that, and it shows that in 2018-19, the enrollment ratio in India is only 26, which means that only 26% of our youth in the age group 18 to 23 are fortunate to enter the portals of higher education. So my point was, there is a close linkage between GR in higher education and the level of economic development. And the policy document, among other things, actually calls for massification of higher education. The target is to increase GR in India by 30%. Sorry, 50% by 2030. By 2030, our aim is to increase enrollment up to 50%. This is actually the level that is attained by countries like China and Brazil. In the United States of America, the enrollment is in the vicinity of 80%. So the government of India is aiming at massification of higher education, increasing enrollment to 50% for the relevant age group 18 to 23. For this, the document again says that it is going to earmark 6% of the GDP for education in general, both by the central and the state government. So we have a target of increasing enrollment in higher education. And for that purpose, the document speaks of increased investment, especially public investment in higher education. But how these resources are going to be raised, what is the role of the central and the state government in mobilizing these resources, has to be seen in the coming days. So these are policy announcement, increasing GR to 50%, increasing investment to 6% of GDP. And coming to other important policy announcement, which will have implications for the higher education in the state, the first point that we have to take into account is the institutional restructuring and the consolidation that is pointed out in the document. Actually, by 2030 and 31, the entire affiliating system is going to be dismantled. The higher education architecture will consist of three types of institutions. The first type is called research-intensive multidisciplinary universities. The document actually calls for dismantling of disciplinary silos or disciplinary separation. It speaks of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary teaching, learning, and research. So I was talking about three types of institutions that is visualized in the document. Research-intensive universities, they are multidisciplinary universities where importance is given to research. Second, you have teaching-intensive universities. They are called the type 2 institutions. There you have more of teaching and also research, and the long-run objective is to convert these universities into research universities. And the third type is the vast majority of colleges. And the recommendation is that all the colleges, they will be given degree granting powers. They will become autonomous, or by 2035, the entire affiliating system will be abolished and all the colleges will be given degree granting powers subject to certain conditions. If they are not qualified for giving or awarding degrees, they will be treated as part of constituent colleges of universities. These are the recommendations. Actually, there are several limitations of these recommendations. For example, take the case of Kerala. I told you that in Kerala, we have only 14 universities, mostly public universities. And out of the 14 universities, only 4 or 5 universities are multidisciplinary universities or some type of research going on. All other universities in the state, they are discipline-based universities. So only Kerala, MG, Calicut, Kannur, and to a certain extent, Cochin University, they have this multidisciplinary character. All other universities are discipline-based. And if we want to implement this policy, we require huge funds. We cannot close down public universities. We have to start new programs which are of interdisciplinary in nature. So huge funds are required for converting existing discipline-based universities in the state to prepare themselves for meeting these challenges or converting them into multidisciplinary universities. Most of the state governments are reeling under financial difficulties. How they can start new courses is a big question. We know the situation in our state. So this is going to create big problem. And the argument is that the affiliating system is very inefficient. There are several limitations of the affiliating system. But in a vast country like India, in a state like Kerala, it was the affiliating system that provided access, quality education to all sections and all regions of our state. The type of education that is implemented or imparted in the University College in Thiruvananthapuram and the type of education that we are giving to students in the remote village of Attapadi or Attapadi Government College is more or less the same. There may be differences in the infrastructural facilities, but the teaching, learning process, curriculum, all are the same. So there was an historical role for the affiliating system because the system actually provided access to the remote villages. It provided access to quality education for the marginalized section. Okay. Or can our colleges, are they in a position to conduct multidisciplinary courses in an efficient manner by which they can award degrees? There may be few colleges, but the vast majority of our colleges, think of the self-financing colleges in our state. We are always talking about either government college or the aided college, but the vast majority of students and the so-called frontier courses, most of them are in the self-financing institutions and the self-financing stream. So the implementation of this institutional restructuring may pose a big challenge. If implemented without proper preparation, it will create academic chaos throughout the country. So this policy has to be discussed before it is finally implemented. We have to strengthen our state universities. We have to strengthen our colleges. Then only we can survive in the face of this policy pronouncement. And there is also recommendations with regard to new type of degree programs. We speak of new degree programs with different duration. And also we speak about flexibility, saying that you can enter and exit. Say, given the structure of our colleges and our institutions, say, this may pose big problem. For example, a student can join for a three-year degree program. He can exit with a certificate in the first year. In the second year, he can exit with a diploma. And if he remains there for the third year, he may get a degree. At the same time, you have a 4-year degree program. So when you have 3-year and 4-year degree programs together, there is always the possibility of an undue privileging of one program over the other. People will look at the 3-year programs as something inferior when the same is offered in a college. That is the situation. But with a 4-year degree program, you can enter for a PG with 1-year duration. So there will be 3-year degree program and 4-year degree program. And there will be 1-year PG program and 2-year PG program. This may be possible. Some of these changes may be possible at the university level. But this kind of free entry and exit at the colleges, it can pose big problems in the functioning of our higher education institutions. So this may create problems not only for the colleges, it may create biggest trouble for the students. The cost of education will increase. Instead of spending 3 years, you have to go in for 4-year program. But when 4-year programs are considered superior in the job market, in the employment market, those with 3-year degree programs are going to face another competition. So this type of fragmentation of our programs based on different duration, different provisions for free entry and exit, instead of helping the poor, the marginalized, the backward sections of society, it may increase their problem, it may reduce their accessibility, it may increase their cost of higher education. So this is going to create some kind of problem in the coming in the coming years if they are implemented. And there is also the proposal to establish big universities. They are multidisciplinary education and research universities. Policy calls for the same type of norms for evaluating the performance of public and private institutions. This may adversely affect, again, marginalized public institutions, because public institutions are mainly set up to provide quality education and also based on socially determined norms. They're actually serving certain social objectives in higher education. But private institutions, if they are evaluated by the same criteria, they will be getting more credit and they will enter into the so-called quality benchmark very easily. So this is evident from the evaluation method adopted by accrediting agency. In the colleges, in public institutions, we find it very difficult to get high score, whereas private institutions, they are very quick in getting all quality benchmark. If you examine the website of certain leading private institutions, you may be surprised to see that most of the retired scientists from ISRO or from leading national institutions are listed in their website as visiting faculty or sometimes a part of their faculty department. But take the case of public funded institutions, even professors are really not very enthusiastic in providing the details of their publication to the IQAC coordinator. So in most of the private universities, private institutions, they create a situation in which they get high rating at the time of their evaluation, accreditation. So you cannot think of a situation in which both public institutions are private and private institutions are evaluated by the same criteria. And this will also be reflected in the next turn in the fixation of fee. If fee is fixed very high in public institutions, similar to that of a private institution, this will again adversely affect the social objectives of higher education. This will again marginalize the different sections from the mainstream of higher education. Access and equity in higher education will be adversely affected. Coming to the role of teachers, actually the document never talks about any kind of reservation in appointment of teachers or students. It actually emphasizes on merit-based promotions. So, say, these are going to be big challenges. We have to see how most important stipulations based on constitutional values are going to be reflected in the coming days in the implementation of these policies. And another important recommendation in the policy is the establishment of National Research Foundation. This appears a very good suggestion. The aim of the government is to earmark at least 0.1% of the GDP for research, which at this point of time the document says is less than 0.1%. So there is going to be a big push for research. But again, the problem is research is going to be separated from universities. Actually, our university system has suffered very a lot on research, mainly because of the fact that the central government created separate institutions for research. Under the CSIR, there are 44 research institutions. Under the DBT or the DST, you have large number of autonomous or independent research institutions. This actually reduced the flow of funds to most of the universities. Not to speak of the case of state universities, which are already facing big expenditure cut. So the situation that has been created in the research field was mainly due to denial of funds to universities for research. We are now not talking about minor research project or major research project. UGC is not at all funding any research for teachers, especially in affiliated colleges. The situation will become worse if a separate, say, agency is entrusted with the task, and there will be research based on certain individual proposals, and it is feared that those proposals which suit the corporate objectives, they may get a priority given the situation that is prevailing in the country. Because we have instances of some of the universities getting very high rating even before they are born. So research, though it is a very good proposal, it is actually cut off from the university system. Research must take place in universities, and the decisions regarding allotment of funds and the merit of research proposals should be decided by academic bodies like the universities. This is a major criticism that is leveled against the National Research Foundation. So I may stop at this point. There are important recommendations, other recommendations regarding B.Ed education. By 2030, only 4-year B.Ed program will be recognized as the basic qualification for teacher education. And again, in teacher education, there are references for 2-year teacher education degrees along with 4-year teacher education programs. At one point, it says that you can have 1-year B.Ed also. In the coming days, you will have BA, B.Ed, BSc, B.Ed, BCom, B.Ed. That is one argument. On the other hand, it says that this BA, BSc, BCom nomenclature will be abolished. There will be only Bachelor of Liberal Arts with a major subject and a minor subject. These are some of the issues that has to be discussed and developed in future. But teacher education colleges, they cannot stand alone. They should be part of multidisciplinary teaching learning, or you have to convert the existing teacher education colleges into multidisciplinary teaching institutions, which means you have to invest more. You have to start other courses in B.Ed colleges for their survival? Who is going to fund all this? And all these new initiatives will depend on public funds. But the document relies more on private funding and philanthropic funding. So you can imagine the type of situation that may emerge in future if these recommendations are left to the private sector for philanthropic investment. Say it will adversely affect the existing public institutions. It will adversely affect the teaching learning process. It will adversely affect equity and excellence in higher education. It will further marginalize different sections of society. These are some of my initial remarks. In the discussion, I can offer you some other points if necessary. Because of this poor connectivity, so I am concluding at this point. Thank you. I thank the college authorities, especially the energetic IQSC coordinators, Sheena Xavier and Aparna Lakshman for inviting me to this program. I also once again thank the principal, Sister Gigi Jonema Xavier, for their good work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The session is now open to participants. Participants can either post your queries in the chat box or unmute your microphones and ask questions.
There is a question from Srijil Kotail. How it's going to help the skill development education? Rajan sir, there is a question. Yeah, there is a question from a participant.
Okay. I saw it. Skill development, actually, in this document, there is mention for vocationalization. It is argued that by 2030 and 40, say, vocational education will have to be integrated into all levels of education. It speaks for starting vocational components from the 6th standard onwards. Actually, this idea has to be discussed critically, because the purpose of education is not vocational education. Some even say that vocational education and skill development, they are not part of higher education. There is no education in vocational education or skill development. They should be treated separately. If you introduce this idea of skill development at the very school level, you are going to create further barriers in education for the weaker sections of society. And an impression is created in the system that vocational education is for the market. It depends on employability. It depends on the type of economy that is emerging. Higher education, research, they are actually meant for a certain privileged sections of society. And the weaker sections, they will be at the very initial stages, will be diverted to vocational stream. Skill development actually is linked to the level of economic development of a society. For example, in Kerala, we have large number of ITIs and polytechnics. Their purpose is to provide skill. And there is also the possibility of lateral entry into higher education. Polytechnic students can enter higher education or engineering education if they are very studious. So there is too much emphasis on skill development in higher education, which will ultimately create problems. It will reduce the very purpose of higher education. And this is evident from major courses that we started on the basis of the Jnana Committee report in the late 1990s. In the colleges, we started large number of vocational programs. Today, we have BVOC programs. We know the fate of the students who are enrolled in these programs. We say they are terminal courses, but to attract students, we say that there is vertical mobility. So some of the best students, because of employment requirement, they join these BVOC courses. It has an urban bias. Some of these vocational courses cannot be conducted in rural areas. So what we require is a new strategy for skill development and vocational education. That should not be the sole purpose of higher education. That is my point.
Thank you, sir. There is another question from Shyama Rakesh. MPhil is banned. Is it justifiable?
Okay, there is a proposal for that, and the remedy that is pointed out in the document is that you have 4-year degree program, and in the 4-year degree, the 4th year, say you will be trained in the art and science of research. You will have a project. You will be trained in those matters required for pursuing your higher education, because you are going to be part of multidisciplinary research universities. So this is the reason why the MPhil program stands cancelled. But MPhil program was a very good program. Actually, it provided a lot of methodological clarity for the students who were very eager to enter the PhD program.
Yeah. Next question is from Abdul Wahid. Does this MEP has impact on current undergraduate students and higher education? What is your view on the same?
Actually, it's the current batch of students, they are in a sense confused that their 3-year degree program may not continue for a long period, and there will be 4-year degree programs in the coming years. This confusion is there, but I think it will take some time for the system to stabilize. There is nothing to worry about the existing students with regard to their 3-year degree program. So it will take a very long time. And this 4-year degree program, I think it's very difficult to start in affiliated colleges at this point of time. We know even we are finding it difficult to appoint teachers for the 3-year degree program. So how the government overnight start 4-year program, it may come up in some of the universities in the initial days. Only after a certain period, so you can think of 4-year degree programs in affiliated colleges, and there is nothing to worry about the existing students. That's my opinion.
There is another question from Basil Matthew. What about chances of our traditional courses like BA History, Sociology, Politics? How we survive?
Okay, actually, there is a big question. In fact, the policy document speaks about graduate attributes. It's based on outcome-based education. So these are actually concepts that are developed in line with the market requirement or industry requirement. This is true mainly for professional courses like BTech, MBA, etc. You can think of employability, but you cannot think of employability of a graduate in history or in social science or humanities. These disciplines, they are actually facing biggest challenge, not only in this country, all over the world. Social science departments, they are facing the biggest challenge. If this trend is continuing, some of the social science departments and humanities department, they are going to face difficulties. But when you think about the knowledge base, knowledge creation, the purpose of education, these humanities and social science programs are very important. They are taught in major universities, and for that purpose, we have to redesign our program. We have to reorient our teachers to meet the challenges of these new policies. They are very important. Social science and humanities courses are very important, but they cannot be evaluated on the basis of their employability. That's why I said the skill development component, the vocational component, they cannot be easily integrated into this vocation, into this humanities and social science stream. They are different. They have to be treated differently. That is my point.
Thank you, sir. There is again one more point raised by Srijil Kotail. It's seen that many jobs existing today will not be in the next 10 to 15 years. In Kerala, as we are standing back in skill-based jobs and motivation placements, so how can we go with the old updated skill-based programs?
Actually, the level of employment depends on several factors. One major determinant of employability or employment opportunities is the growth of the economy itself. Take, for example, in Kerala, we have nearly 146 engineering colleges. The total number of seats in engineering colleges was 60,000. There was no takers for 25,000 seats in engineering. Actually, some of the engineering colleges were offering very good programs. And at the national level, we have 15 lakhs engineering seats. Only half of these seats are filled. This year, AICT has given permission to close down 180 engineering colleges. So on the one hand, we have excess supply of technically skilled personnel. And the argument is that some of them are not employable. So the quality of our existing institutions have to be improved. The teaching learning process in technological institutions like engineering or in professional field, that has to be improved. And there is large supply of such institutions. And if new jobs are coming with a new skill, we have already the institutional facilities remaining in our system. There is no dearth of such institutions. There is no shortage of such programs in our universities. My argument is don't convert all our institutions for meeting the challenges of the market. You can have a component of a skill or vocation in your curriculum or in your teaching learning, but converting the entire system to meet the requirement of the market will create problem. We have excess supply of engineering graduates. Some of them are very good and some may not be up to the mark. But today we have large number of technical institutions, both in the public and the private sector. The point is the growth of our economy is not commensurate with the growth of the labor supply or graduates from these institutions. There is big imbalance. This is created by the commercial interest without taking into account the growth of the economy, without taking into account the future of the students. So we have lot of capacity remaining unutilized or underutilized. So there won't be any shortage of skilled labor in our country given the present situation.
Thank you, sir. There is another question from Deepankar Karmarkar. What are the added benefits received by the student in the comparison to earlier policy?
Actually, the proposed changes, they speak about flexibility and also the possibility of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary studies. Students can enter into a program, they can exit as and when they like. As I said, if it is a 3-year program, the first year they can continue the program and they can exit with a certificate. They can seek employment. Second year, they have the freedom to exit. So this freedom of entry and exit is supposed to be given in the system. And also they have the possibility of exposure to multidisciplinary institutions instead of confining themselves to what is called disciplinary silos or disciplinary barriers. So this may increase the academic mobility of some of the best students. And also a 4-year degree program is accepted in the Western countries. The number of students going out of the country may not be a big number, but those who are aspiring to go abroad for research, say, they have all these provisions incorporated. And also we speak about new curriculum that may come up, and the only thing that is suggested is the CBCSS will be modified. So these are some of the perceived benefits that is given in that document.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from our principal, Dr. Sister Gigi Jonama Xavier. 4-year B.Ed degree course is recommended. Is it needed?
Yes, the document says that by 2030, the basic qualification for appointment as a teacher in a teacher education college is the 4-year degree B.Ed program. That is specifically mentioned. That means if it is 2030, you have to start preparing a curriculum for that. You have to restructure your existing B.Ed colleges. B.Ed will not be permitted in standalone institutions. It should be part of either the university system or it should be part of a multidisciplinary institutions. So standalone B.Ed colleges are not permitted under this policy. They have to be part of the multidisciplinary university system or part of our colleges where we have more than one program. So this is specifically stated. At the same time, it speaks about two-year program, 1-year program. All this has created confusion. And the teacher education college teachers, they are very active. They are very seriously discussing the implications of this policy on teacher education. And you should keep in mind that in India, we have nearly 18,500 B.Ed colleges. Like engineering education, there is a glut in the market as far as B.Ed education is concerned. There is excess supply. Already the market is flooded with B.Ed degree holders. So this may increase the problem of that sector. And the council has appointed a committee to look into this problem. And one report is given to the government. Government has to take a decision on this matter very shortly. Okay.
Next question is from Lynette Joseph. Education in mother tongue up to 5th standard and promotion of other languages is emphasized. Has the policy not given importance to English education?
Yes, there is a view that the implementation of this language policy in the document may adversely affect English education, and the strategy is to bring mother tongue, and we are not against mother tongue. Our earlier stand was that as far as possible, mother tongue should be used at all levels. But the problem with the mother tongue is that it has not developed. Malayalam has not developed as a knowledge language. It has not developed as a knowledge language, whereas all the important teaching, learning, and textbook knowledge books are in English. So the increased accent on mother tongue, it is feared, may adversely affect the knowledge-based teaching learning process. And some other states, they have already questioned this rationale contained in the document. Kerala was always supportive of mother tongue at the school level, and also we are not opposed to the use of mother tongue. But the point is, mother tongue or Malayalam should emerge or develop as a knowledge language. Then only we can think of transition to such a level of study. Okay.
Next question is from Dr. Sindhu B. I think we get more researchers and higher thinking students while implementing the NEP because the students with higher order thinking only can move ahead. Sir, do you agree?
Actually, the facility for research is actually limited in our universities, and not to speak about the situation prevailing in colleges. We have a large number of very eminent teachers with research aptitude and publications in affiliated colleges. The system is not funding any type of research. And in our state, the research universities are only 3 or 4 or 5. Others are only, as I said earlier, discipline-based universities concentrating mainly on conduct of examinations. So the central policy to create separate research institutions deprived funds to the universities in the first stage. In the second stage, what we are going to witness is again a separate mechanism will be put in place which will decide on the quality and nature of research, and university system is going to be further marginalized. Of course, there are several avenues. I have told you that even CSIR has 45, 50 research laboratories. Facilities are there, but the best students should come up from our higher education system.
There is one more question in the chat box, maybe the last question. The higher order thinking should start from the grassroots level. Shouldn't the Anganwadi and KG teachers be given proper training as they lay the foundation of education in children?
Okay, it's bringing students, children of 3-year age to the fold of foundational education may appear as very attractive, but say the Anganwadi teachers or teachers at that level, they are not properly trained. They are not trained teachers. So we have dearth of trained teachers at different levels of schooling, and the Anganwadis are actually not workers are not, they are Anganwadi called teachers. They are not trained in the art and science of teaching. If you have trained teachers at that level, that may definitely to the benefit of the child.
I think that is all from the chat box. So let me move on to the official closure of the program. We often take for granted the very things that most deserve our gratitude. On behalf of Internal Quality Assurance Cells in Xavier's College for Women Alva, let me express my sincere gratitude to all who are behind the success of today's webinar. Our dear principal, Dr. Sister Gigi Jonama Xavier, is a constant source of inspiration and the driving force behind all the activities of our college. Dear sister, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for all the support and guidance for today's webinar. Well,
Thank you, Aparna.
thank you, sister. When we thought of organizing a webinar on National Education Day Policy 2020, the first name that came to our mind is that of Dr. Rajan Varghese. He was kind enough to accept our invitation despite of his busy schedule and the bad climatic conditions. I'm privileged to add that I was a colleague of our resource person for a short span, and my husband was his student while doing his UG in BA Economics in 1998. On behalf of IQAC, management, principal, faculty of St. Xavier's College, all the delegates present here, and on my personal behalf, I thank you, sir, for your valuable presence and thought-provoking words. I also thank our Vice Principal, Dr. Sister Stella, and IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Sheena Xavier, for their dynamic leadership and selfless efforts in organizing today's program. Thank you, sister. Thank you, Sheena, ma'am. Let me also thank all the faculty members and in particular IQAC members of St. Xavier's College for all their support and prayers. This webinar was organized in academic association with Kerala State Higher Education Council. I thank KSHEC for accepting our request and for the academic collaboration extended. We have around 250 registrations from in and outside the state. It is your presence that made this webinar meaningful. On behalf of the organizing committee, I thank all the delegates for their presence and cooperation throughout the webinar. Once again, thanking each and every one of you, I conclude. Thank you.